Hi, my name's Lisa Stewart and this is my presentation for EDC1200, How Might Education Mediate Difference and Dominance? Australia has a long history as a proud country. In more recent history, this pride as a nation has encompassed the promotion of Australia as a multicultural community. The ideal of multiculturalism promotes the extending of equitable status to all people within a community. Multiculturalism in this context has the potential to create a society where difference is not deficit. However, sometimes true multiculturalism may be confused with a philosophy that stems from discourses in cultural value and enrichment to the dominant. The incident I will now discuss reflects that perhaps Australia is not a truly multicultural community. In December 2009, a decision was made by the local authority in the Swan Valley, Perth, that resulted in the rejection of a building application to allow the construction of a mosque. It was reported by the Australian newspaper that the application was rejected on the grounds of its inability to meet streetscape architecture and traffic congestion requirements. There were also allegations of religious and cultural discrimination. These allegations were validated by copies of signed petitions from within the local community, attesting to an intolerance for the religion and people of Islamic ethnic groups. In teaching English in the high school setting, I would incorporate this incident into the curriculum in these ways. Introduce areas of discussion relating to media representations of diasporas, emphasising the use of media as an English communication tool. Engage in research and discussion about the history of storytelling from sources other than Anglo-Celtic backgrounds. Relate the importance of the interconnection between literature and culture in a culturally diverse sense. Attempt to display the interrelation between cross-cultural literature and the arts in general. Invite students to share and participate in the sharing of literature and culture from sources other than Anglo-Celtic, and in these studies try to develop close readings of the texts and correlate the content to the social and political influences that have informed the subject matter. Examine the texts behind religious doctrines across a diverse range and attempt to correlate what that content means in terms of belonging to the broader human family. My goal would be to enable students to gain an understanding that, to identify as being a truly multicultural community, there is an onus on individuals within that community to choose to exercise tolerance in respect of diversity. Since the events of 9/11, there has been a sense within the communities of the Western world of a mistrust of Muslims. Despite 40% of all Australian Muslims having been born here, this mistrust based on stereotypical ideology continues. This is perpetuated by what might be deemed as appropriate traits in physical appearance relating to dress and grooming. The diaspora assumes a collective appearance. The way one looks might connote the way one believes or behaves. A great many believe that because somebody looks a particular way, we presume they will exhibit certain character traits. It would be a fair assumption, unfortunately, that in modern-day Australia, the burqa has come to parallel a meaning for Islamic religious fundamentalism and/or terrorism. In this regard, I would discuss with students the consequences in ascribing identities based on appearance and, to stimulate discussion, challenge them with this question. Is it unsettling or confusing when expectations in appearance do not meet expected exhibited character traits? Fundamentally, my students would be asked to engage in an understanding that difference is not deficit. I would encourage discussion and critical thinking as to the points of difference between the ethos of Christianity and Islam. A key element in this would be to investigate and locate examples of the similarities of ritual, prayer, and care for the community as a whole between Christians and Muslims. I would place an emphasis on the importance of individuals within the collective community to understand that differences in appearance and the underlying philosophies of each religion are assumed and revered or feared in either meeting or negating what is considered normal or appropriate by the dominant forces within a particular community. I would therefore question my students in this way. How, in choosing to exercise tolerance, can we contribute to a more just existence for the diversity of humanity as a whole? Differences in appearance and faith need not stipulate differences in value for life and engagement within the community. The media have been largely responsible in facilitating myth concerning the Muslim community. The media is able to pursue this approach by sensational reporting techniques endorsed by public opinion and an insatiable consumption for sensationalism. This consumption of myth is partly responsible for the Swan Valley Council decision and for the ascription of identity to Muslim people in Australia. This is from a journal article entitled Depiction of Muslims in Selected Australian Media. It reads, "Many of Australia's 281,578 Muslims believe that as a result of media bias, they are vilified in society as terrorists and discriminated against in the workplace." I would encourage discussion about the implications and consequences of the media in relation to informing identity ascription and how tolerance might overcome the injustice of this by asking, should it be considered important for individuals to regularly question and arbitrate discourse presented via mass media? This approach would leave scope for engaging in research of various media forms to ascertain whether biased or sensational reporting has taken place, and if so, why, and what are the consequences for those concerned and society as a whole. I would also encourage discussion as to how religious discrimination has the potential to promote feelings of alienation within the Muslim community and what might be the consequences of this. I would ask students to compare how they might feel if they were denied an important aspect of their daily life. I might ask them to compare this scenario. Do you think that there would be any objections to the planned construction of a Christian church anywhere in Australia? The tabling of these questions in the classroom would ultimately lead to this question. So how can we change things? There is a need as a community and as individuals to understand and practice tolerance. It's cliché, but we all have a responsibility to remember that we are all someone's son or daughter. We all belong to the same human family, and therefore we need to practice being human. Our individual appearance is not what makes us human. Understanding those who we perceive as being different and choosing not to exercise power and dominance over them is what ties us to the human family. I would facilitate discussion about how sometimes ignorance is easier to live with than the truths and complexities of diversity. It is particularly relative for high school students and the associated peer pressures that sometimes the feeling of belonging to the dominant group might outweigh the importance of choosing to exercise tolerance. It is natural that we generally want to fit in and not suffer humiliation for our own unpopular beliefs and opinions. Going against the flow may lead to us feeling outcast. In choosing to exercise tolerance, we may sometimes choose a more difficult path for ourselves. But we need to be mindful of the importance of preserving equitable status for all, the core values and the positive consequences for society in choosing to exercise tolerance. Difference is diversity, not deficit. Accepting and appreciating difference means that mutual respect becomes a priority and an underlying moral code for living together.